we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll keep an eye in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself, say hi, say, if you have any questions for Alexis, if there's anything that you've been thinking about lately with regards to diet culture. So we became friends with Alexis. I don't actually know how. I'm assuming it was through social media somehow, but we recently had her on our podcast in January when Gina was doing a deep dive into diet culture. And then she also did an Instagram live with us. Is that correct? Yes. I've been joking in the last 2 days that I have vacation brain. I was in Disney World for a week before this, and I came back way more tired than before I left. So with that in mind, why don't I have Alexis, why don't you give your quick introduction, bio, your book, give us your spiel.
Hi, I'm so glad to see some people joining live, and then I know we'll have some people on the recording as well. So I'm really excited that you all asked me to come here and to talk about this. I think it's a really important topic. I'm really excited to see people involved in media, taking on this bent, because I think we can have such a big impact on a lot of people when we can share this message. It's one thing for me, like as a therapist, to be kind of doing the one-on-one stuff that you all are out there really talking to a wider audience. So I'm so excited that you're happy, that you're wanting to learn about this. So today we're going to be talking about how do we talk about health and fitness through a health at every size or anti-diet lens. So about me, I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm the owner of Conason Psychological Services, which is a weight-inclusive, health at every size informed therapy practice in New York City. We're a group practice. We have a few therapists here. I'm also the author of The Diet-Free Revolution, 10 Steps to Free Yourself from the Diet Cycle with Mindful Eating and Radical Self-Acceptance. And that's a lot of what I talked about with Gina on the podcast, was the book. I have a mindful eating program called the Anti-Diet Plan. That's a virtual program for people wanting to leave behind diet culture and learn more about mindful eating. And then you can also find me on Instagram at the Anti-Diet Plan. And one thing I want to preface this conversation with is just by sharing that I'm a multi-privileged person. I'm white, cisgendered, thin privileged, able-bodied. I am highly educated. I've had access to education. I'm financially stable. So, I think that when we have those privileges, it does color how we see the world. And, I think it's important to hold in mind that like this presentation and the conversation today is through that lens. We're going to be talking today, I'm going to do like a brief kind of power this presentation. It's going to be brief, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. But in the presentation, I'm hoping to cover just some basic terms and definitions, so we're all on the same page. We're going to talk a little bit about health at every size and what is health at every size, and also what language we can use to talk about people in different body sizes. And then we'll open it up for discussion. So I know this is a little bit dense, but I'm going to try to run through these quickly, and you'll have the recording so you can always go back to things if it's too fast. But health at every size, which we're going to be talking more about on the next 2 slides as well, is a social justice movement that is dedicated to separating weight from health and to working to improve access to health promoting behaviors for people across the size spectrum. And I think it's really important that we remember that health isn't just about nutrition and fitness. I think that when we're in kind of the fitness world, well, I'm not in the fitness world, so I don't want to speak to you, but I see oftentimes like a tendency to really kind of boil everything down to like, it's just about what you eat and how you move. And that's like the secret to health. And when we look at like a pie chart, health, fitness and nutrition have some impact on health, but it's not, it's like a small slice of that pie chart. And some of the things that the Health at Every Size movement is dedicated to addressing are other things that have pretty profound impacts on health, such as discrimination, marginalization, socioeconomic status, and poverty. This is actually shown to be one of the biggest predictors of health is income level. So, I think it takes a more holistic approach to health, which is important. when we talk about dieting, a lot of people say like, well, what is a diet even? Or a lot of people tell me, well, I'm not dieting, I'm just doing X, Y, and Z, which sounds an awful lot like a diet. So I define dieting as restricting your eating according to any kind of an outside set of rules. So that can be done to lose weight, or it can be done to improve health. And oftentimes when we talk about improving health, again, this is where I think like wellness culture can get very messy and sticky. Oftentimes when we talk about improving health, like really that's kind of becoming a code word for losing weight, because we believe that in order to be healthy, we do have to be thin. But as like the anti-diet movement has gathered steam, I do think people are catching on that like, you know, maybe it's less acceptable to say outright that we want to lose weight. So we start couching it within this health kind of language. But oftentimes we're talking about the same thing. And dieting can be either like a formal diet plan, you know, like Weight Watchers or Noom or Paleo or something like that, or it can be a more vague diet mentality. So something like, I have a lot of people say, I don't diet, I just eat clean, or, you know, I just count macros, or I, you know, only eat whole foods. You know, that's all kind of part of the diet mentality as well. Things that are dividing foods up into categories of like good foods or bad foods, and I should eat this, I shouldn't eat that. Diet culture refers to the whole system of this that we're all kind of swimming in. So it's a widespread system of beliefs that equates thinness and weight loss with health, moral value, desirability, and superiority. Diet culture is an amalgamation of systems of oppression, including but not limited to the patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy. So that's a definition taken from my book, The Diet-Free Revolution. And then two other terms are weight normative, which refers to kind of the current state of the medical system for the most part, which is this idea that there's like one healthy ideal weight range and that everyone should do whatever they can to meet that standard. And it's in contrast to a weight inclusive perspective on health, which includes things like the Health at Every Size movement, where we respect body diversity and believe that bodies are naturally meant to exist across the size and weight spectrum, and that health is not determined by our weight. So I'll go through these principles. Actually, I'll just kind of say a little bit about each one in the interest of time, but this is all available on the ASDA website. So ASDA is the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health. They are one of the leading authorities on health at every size. So I would highly recommend going to their website, checking out their resources, joining the organization. It's a really good one to support if you can. So the 5 principles that they define as the Health at Every Size movement include weight inclusivity, accepting and respecting the inherent diversity of body shapes and sizes, while rejecting or the idealizing or pathologizing of specific weights. 2, health enhancement, which is kind of what we were talking about before, supporting health policies that improve and equalize access to information and services and practices that improve well-being, looking at well-being as a more global construct. 3 is eating for well-being, promoting flexible, individualized eating based on hunger, satiety, nutritional needs, and pleasure, rather than any externally regulated eating plan. 4 is respectful care. This is where a lot comes out around working to acknowledge biases, ending weight discrimination, weight stigma, weight bias, and also understanding the intersection of people who have multiple marginalized identities and how that can make things even more difficult for people, depending on, you know, what privileges and marginalizations you have. And then the 5th is life enhancing movement, supporting physical activities that allow people of all sizes, abilities, and interests to engage in enjoyable movement to the degree that they choose. So Health at Every Size also emphasizes the idea that we have the choice to engage in all of these things, and people should be given access to all of these things that can improve health, but it's not a moral obligation, and everybody is deserving of respect and dignity, regardless of their health status. So I know one of the big questions that you all were struggling with is, what words should we use to talk about body size? And to be honest, this is something that I struggled with a lot too when I was writing my book. as a therapist, I have the luxury of talking to clients one-on-one and really starting to understand, like, what are the words that they feel most comfortable using about their body. And I think whenever possible, if we can use the language that clients, that like the other person prefers, that's the way to go. But it's really hard when you're writing for one audience and we can't like go around asking like, hey, what kind of language do you use to talk about your body? Because we have to choose that for our readers. So I think that, there's no perfect answer here. And because people have different types of language that they prefer to use for their body, there's going to be some people where you use one word and a group of people says, oh, I don't like that word. That's not what I use. That doesn't resonate. And then you use, another word and there's going to be another group that's turned off by it. So I think that it's never going to be perfect. We can't please everyone, but we can do our best to avoid stigmatizing and pathologizing language and, just be thoughtful in what we're doing. And you can even, when possible, explain why you're using the language that you're using and how you made those choices. Like in my book, obviously I had a little more room than in a short article, but in my book, I was able to include like a few pages of like, why I chose this language and the meaning behind it. So, it doesn't have to be pages, obviously, sometimes a little asterisk with just a sentence or so, and a link to, a resource of why that explains it in more depth.
And I'll jump in. When I'm editing articles for aSweatLife, this is always something that I can add in super quickly. If you tell me that's what you're interested in, it would be no skin off my back to include sort of a quick explainer as to why we're using this language and to include a link. So that's definitely something that we can do as writers and editors going forward on the site.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I want to start off with using what we call the O words. So these are words including overweight, obese, obesity, and often we see obesity written with an asterisk because in the health at every size and fat acceptance communities, obesity really is seen to be so pathologizing that it's treated like an expletive. So we do star it out because it can be really offensive to people. And some of the reasons that these words are so offensive is that it medicalizes and pathologizes body size. So literally as of 2013, when the American Medical Association declared obesity as a disease, which was a very controversial decision. If you're interested in learning more about that, I have some articles online that I've written. But it was, in my opinion, not something that was purely based on the science here. But since the AMA made that designation, obesity literally means disease, a diseased body. So, it's pathologizing, and a lot of people who meet BMI criteria for obese are otherwise healthy. So I don't know how accurate it is. And again, it can just be very pathologizing and stigmatizing. And it links in a lot with weight bias in the medical system as well, because people have in larger bodies have had, really widespread systemic issues of being able to get competent medical care because their body is seen as a disease. And kind of that's the only thing that is being looked at and treated in a doctor's office. So that's one of the reasons that obesity can be a very pathologizing term to use. There are some research studies that, look at like what terms people prefer. Obesity tends to be one of the least preferred by people, who have firsthand experiences of living in a larger body. The term obese literally comes from the Latin word obesus, which means to have eaten oneself fat, which obviously is very problematic. And then the term overweight is, again, it's a very weight normative based term. So it implies, right in the word, it's implied that there's one acceptable weight range and that you're over it. So, it's that weight normative model. Some other words that often are used to refer to people in a larger body is plus size. And oftentimes this term is not preferred either unless you're talking specifically about clothing or fashion, because plus size refers to fashion. So, when we're talking about thin people, we usually just say thin people. We don't say like straight sized people. That sounds weird unless you're, again, in the fashion industry, you're talking about something specific about fashion. There's a lot of euphemisms for fat. So words like curvy, fluffy, zoftig, plump. There's a sense that these words, again, because they're euphemisms, it's the sense of kind of dancing around something like that, like fat is so bad, we can't say it, we can't talk about it, we have to like think of these other ways to kind of hide it in a way. So a lot of the times those words are not really preferred either. In the fat acceptance and fact activism communities, fat is the preferred term. And I know that not everyone is comfortable with this word, so I say it kind of, you know, but to give you the background, there is a movement to reclaim the word fat and to take a word that's been used to do harm and that's been used, you know, as kind of a slur against people, to reclaim that and really to try to make it as a neutral descriptor. So there's nothing inherently hurtful about the term fat. It's really like a neutral term to describe the size of somebody's body. And it's in many ways the most accurate one when we say, you know, then contrasted fat or thin, and fat body is one with more fat on it. But I do think it's important to also hold in mind that not everyone's there yet. Not everyone is comfortable with that language. Some other terms that we can use is higher weight. So again, this isn't ideal because it, again, contrast is this idea that you're higher, you know, higher than what? But I think that in the scheme of some of this kind of less than ideal language, it's a better choice than some of the others. It's definitely better than using the O words in my mind. And some other terms that are used within the fat acceptance community is living in a larger body or a person in a larger body. Again, not like 100% ideal, but it's, you know, okay for what we have to work with, and a person or people of size. So whenever possible, we do try to use the language that person prefers to talk about their body, but understanding, you know, as a writer, that's usually not possible. So we have to kind of make our own judgment calls around what is the least stigmatizing language, and to, you know, like Kristen said, make a note. You can have her do it when she's editing, about why you're choosing to use the language that you're choosing. A few just very brief last minute kind of closing things to think about is that it's important to center people with lived experience. And I would really encourage you to seek out people in larger bodies as an expert source if you're writing about people in larger bodies. So, you know, they are the experts. They are the ones who have had the lived experience. This is, you know, their life. So I would encourage you to seek them out as expert sources. Also to use diverse representation in the images you use. Can be something so powerful about writing an article that's not even necessarily about body size or weight or anything like that, but maybe you're writing a running article and you choose to use a picture of someone in a larger body running, and it just helps to dispel the myth that, you know, fitness has a size. And I really, you know, think that it just can be powerful to use those kinds of images, not only in articles related to weight. Remember that language matters. What the words we use are important and can have a lot of impact on people. I would encourage everyone to learn more about health at every size, to make that mindset shift to a weight inclusive framework. It's one thing to try to be kind of editing and putting out a HAES message, but unless you've done the work to really make that shift internally, it can feel like a little bit of a disconnect. And then, you know, finally, just that health is not accessible for everyone and that it's not a moral imperative. So to keep that in mind, that people have different access to health and different desire. So here are some resources that we can end with to learn more. There's some books here. I put in my book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by Aubrey Gordon, which is awesome. She writes also under Your Fat Friend, if people are familiar. Anti-Diet by Chrissy Harrison, Body Respect by Lindo Bacon, who I think was also on the Anti-Diet series. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, they're awesome. Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings, which goes into the racial origins of fat phobia, and Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tripoli and Elise Resch. And then in terms of podcasts, there were so many podcasts and I just couldn't think of them all, but two of my favorites are Food Psych, which is by Christy Harrison, and Maintenance Phase, which has been like, it's such a good podcast. And it's also really broken into the mainstream. I think it's like on the top 5 of all Apple podcasts, like of all time. So definitely check that out. And then I would encourage you to follow fat activists on social media and people who are involved with the Health at Every Size movement. There were too many to list here, but Body Liberation with Lindley, which is a great account, has a list of different accounts that you can follow, and so does Reagan Chastain. And Reagan also does some really wonderful workshops that I want to highlight for people wanting to learn more.
One of the questions that Christina had sent me ahead of time that I thought was really interesting was about medical experts. So she's often asked to interview medical experts in her writing and editing. Any places you would suggest she look for experts who have sort of a nuanced take on this subject? Are there any credentials that we should be looking for as writers and editors, or organizations that are, helpful to follow?
So weight inclusive doctors can be hard to find because there's so much weight stigma baked into the medical system. And really, doctors learn in training this message that fat is bad. I think it's starting to shift a little bit. And I would love to get in there in the training level and try to, teach them some different things. But I think right now it still is really also, from the top down in terms of the guidelines from the medical organizations, which are heavily influenced by like the pharmaceutical industry, and it's a whole thing. But so it can be really hard to find weight inclusive doctors. You can look, there is a website, ASDA, which I mentioned before, has like a professional listing. So if you're looking for a doctor or a therapist or a personal trainer or whatever, like in different areas, but it's not always kept totally up to date, and it's off, like a lot of them don't have like there aren't always listings in every area. So, and I think especially with medical doctors, it's very sparse. I think the best thing to do is look for doctors who, either use the terms like health at every size or weight inclusive in their websites or marketing materials. And I think that word of mouth is a great one. Like if you find a good HAES source to kind of pass it along. And I think that is why we tend to hear from a lot of the same few weight inclusive doctors over and over again in a lot of articles.
Yeah. And so to that end, one of the comments that I see on the message boards a lot when I'm brave enough to look is just people, really not understanding that disconnect between health and weight. I know that Maintenance Phase researched a ton and shared a lot of studies about, how that connection is being disproved, but can you speak to any that we could look up on our own time that show that weight is not necessarily associated with other signifiers of health?
There's a lot, and each one, like each study kind of gives like a little, like a different aspect of things. But what I would suggest, yes, I really recommend Maintenance Phase. Like they did a whole episode kind of debunking the connection between weight and health, and they're very science-based, so they give a ton of references. In my book, the first chapter is all about separating out the ideas of weight and health, and I think I have probably like 30 or more references, citations, with the different studies and whatnot. I wish there was like one good central kind of document to give around, but I'm trying to think of what else is out there. I know Reagan Chastain, who I mentioned, has a lot of good resources on their website, and I sent you, Kristen, an article from their website that talks about like a little more in depth about like language and stuff. So I don't know. And Christy Harrison also talks about it a lot on her podcast and also in her book. It gives a good breakdown, but it's complicated. And like, I think that oftentimes we have to kind of go through the studies and understand. Oh, there's one study actually that I talk about in my book that I think is a great one, where it talks about the impact of health behaviors independent of BMI. I don't have the citation off the top of my mind, but that's a good one to use because it talks about how things like, nutrition, fitness, sleep. And when I say nutrition, I think they look at eating more fruits and vegetables, being physically active, sleep, not drinking alcohol in excess, and not smoking cigarettes. Like those behaviors have a big impact on health, and completely independent of weight. So I could try to find the citation for that.
Yeah. I think the last question that I want to end with is, a lot of times I find myself writing or editing pieces about the benefits of this workout or of this nutrient, whatever. And for a lot of the research that I do, I see that, oh, this helps with weight loss, or this helps with weight management or metabolism or burning calories. Is it ever okay to acknowledge that for some people weight loss is a goal, or is there a different way that we should be looking at this?
So it's a great question. So I personally believe that, obviously for many people, weight loss is the goal, because we're told in all directions that that's like the most important thing that we can do is to lose weight. So I think it's important to acknowledge that people want to lose weight and to empathize of like where that's coming from. It's not their fault, certainly, that people want to lose weight. Like, it's a very rational response to a culture that tells us, that weight loss is going to be the path to health and happiness and success and desirability and value and everything good, in our culture. So it makes a lot of sense, but I don't believe that focusing on weight loss is ever really a healthy direction to go as an expert to recommend that for someone else, because first of all, we know that weight is not a behavior, body size is not a behavior. So, and that weight loss tends, long-term, significant weight loss does not tend to be sustainable long-term for the vast majority of people. Like over 90% of people will try to lose weight, lose some weight, gain it back, and be on this kind of yo-yo weight cycling spectrum, which that in and of itself has an impact on our health and can have cardiac effects and things like that, because we're stressing our body going up and down and up and down and in and out of, like restrictive eating, and it can impact our metabolism. It has like all kinds of different effects on our body that is not necessarily what we're looking for. So, and there's a lot of research to support that. And then there's a lot of research to support that, like those few people who do lose a significant amount of weight and keep it off long-term are engaging in behaviors that are very similar to people who are struggling with chronic eating disorders. So even the people who can do that, that's not necessarily the healthiest thing either. So I think that when we can just encourage people to focus on health, if that's what they're looking to do, or, again, like in therapy, I have more leeway of working one-on-one with people, but I always talk to people about like, okay, you want to lose weight, totally makes sense. I get that. Why do you want to lose weight? What are the things you're looking to do? And is there a way to work directly on that instead of like, so many people are living their life on pause, thinking that, weight loss is the be all end all that's going to unlock this like magic key that they can do everything they want to do in their life. Like, can you start doing those things now? So if it's improved mobility, maybe looking at like exercises that can improve mobility, or working the physical trainer, or, exercises that will be accessible to them with mobility limitations. So, and obviously that could be applied to whatever the goals are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It is 11:30 on the nose. Alexis, this was awesome. I love about the part that you ended with about not wanting to live your life on pause while you're waiting to lose weight. So where can we find you on the internet? How can we stay in touch?
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning more, my website is drconason.com. I also have the online mindful eating program is the antidietplan.com. My group practice is Conason Psychological Services.com. I'm most active on Instagram at the Anti-Diet Plan. That's pretty much it.
I think you nailed all of the self-promotion. Nicely done.
Exactly. And my book, The Diet Free Revolution, is available wherever books are sold, paperback, audio, and ebook.
Awesome. Are you working on any new books by any chance?
I'm not. I'm so burnt out from the process of writing the last one, but I want to work on some things, taking down, like really investigating more about the obesity industry and especially like bariatric surgery. So you might see an article coming out about that soon.
Okay.
I can't commit to a book.
Okay. We will be satisfied with that. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It was so nice to see your all's faces, Zoom icons, all of that. Bye, Ronnie. Bye, Karen. Bye, Christina. And we will see you all on the internet.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.